How's it going, everybody? This is Todd Abedrabbo. Hope you're having a great day, and welcome back to another video. Alright folks, it's time for another edition of Living with Disability. In this series, I'll talk about what life is like with an intellectual disability, how it affects people, and ultimately how we can overcome it through various tips and methods to allow people with intellectual disabilities to live a very happy life. Now, I was hoping today that I would get to introduce my mission partner. However, we are still working out details on that, so that's going to have to be pushed back for another week. Instead, for this video, I'm going to be talking about how an early diagnosis can affect one person's lives. Trust me, if there's one thing that really scares a parent, is learning early in the lives of their children that they are diagnosed with an intellectual disability and how it can affect them and also their family as well. So I'll share with you a little bit about what happens to people that are diagnosed early and how that can be treated. Now, I'm a good example of that. When I was born, for at least the first 18 months of my life, I was living a pretty normal life. You know, obviously, I was fed pretty much every single way that other babies were fed during the time, and my parents and my elder sister ultimately took as much care for me as possible. However, ultimately, before my autism diagnosis, I started to feel a little bit of effects in regards to some of my health, obviously. Obviously, by the time of 18 months old, I still hadn't said my first word or even said any sort of speech or something like that, and I was just really having a whole lot of trouble comprehending things. And because of that, that's when my parents knew that there was something wrong with me. Ultimately, my parents would find out that I would be diagnosed with autism at 18 months old. Now, I had no idea that I had autism until I was 10 years old, so ultimately, it was a rather late discovery for me. However, it really did scare my family because ultimately, it had to make them realize exactly what they were going to do with me in order to take care of me and ultimately allow me to have a normal life, because that was exactly what they were feeling at the time, whether or not I was going to be able to live a happy and normal life. And for some people with an intellectual disability, that's just not possible. And yeah, that kind of thing will literally scare the crap out of parents, whether or not their young children end up having a disability at a very young age. Not just autism, but other disabilities like, you know, cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or Williams syndrome, even Rett syndrome. You know, any sort of intellectual disability that is diagnosed in a child at a young age, that's going to cause a whole lot of problems, because ultimately families are going to have to pay for a lot of health services just so that way they can care for their child. And ultimately, once they turn old enough, ultimately that's going to become another bigger problem, because that's when the fear realizes of whether or not those children with disabilities will be able to handle life on their own. But that's just the family side. Let's talk about the person that is diagnosed with the disability. What life is like for them. Ultimately, it's going to be really scary, because when they do find out that they have an intellectual disability, they ultimately have no idea what to think about it, because ultimately they have no idea what's going to happen to them, whether or not they'll be able to live a normal life, whether or not they'll be able to do the things that everybody else does, or whether or not they'll just be happy overall. And trust me, living with an intellectual disability is scary, because ultimately it makes people feel like that, you know, they end up being a whole lot more different than everybody without an intellectual disability is. And I'm going to share with you 3 ways that it can affect a child at a young age. And the first of which is their self-concept. Now, usually most of the time, children at a young age, they're already figuring out exactly what they want to do with their lives. You know, where they want to go to school, you know, what they want to do as a career. And ultimately, you know, think about starting a family, how they're going to be able to live independently once they get old enough. All of those things are very important for people to digest at a young age. They also have a whole bunch of beliefs as well. You know, usually they'll have a belief that, you know, they can succeed, or maybe they can build a whole web group of friends, or even be able to have a successful life at a job, even be a celebrity or something like that. An intellectual disability can really threaten those prospects. Most of the time, people with an intellectual disability at a young age, they're going to feel that they're never going to be able to get to where they want to be. And not only that, it also threatens them personally, because it makes them feel like that they're going to be different compared to everybody else, and ultimately it makes them feel isolated. And as a result, that really leads to a whole lot of loneliness in them, and ultimately it affects their mental health as well. And speaking of which, mental health is the next thing that can be affected affected by a diagnosis at a young age. Usually when you are diagnosed with an intellectual disability, it's not just your overall physical health that can be affected, it's your mental health as well. And a lot of the time, it can really lead to a whole lot of health problems mentally. Usually a lot of violent mood swings sometimes, they might act a little bit differently, and sometimes they may even feel like that, they are so depressed that they don't even know what to do with their lives. Trust me, living with an intellectual disability can be absolutely scary, and it can affect you mentally in so many ways. You really just have a fear of really speaking to people in public because you fear of really screwing up all the time in regards to your speech, and also, you just feel like that you just don't want to be near anything. You just don't feel happy. You just feel like that you really want to break down in your bed, or sometimes, you may feel like that you just don't feel like life is really worth living, all because of an intellectual disability. Trust me, it is that scary. We already know that mental health can affect people in so many ways, whether it's positively or negatively. An intellectual disability can do a mixture of both, and a lot of the time, people with an intellectual disability at a young age, they're going to fear that they're never going to be able to live a successful life once they reach the adolescence. And trust me, that is something that can be a real problem if they do not have the confidence to be able to live just like everybody else does. And the third aspect that can affect somebody with an intellectual disability at a young age is pretty much just social and family interaction. And like I said before, with my autism, one of the things that I have struggled with throughout the entirety of my life is really struggling with communication, speaking to everybody in person without the fear of screwing up. And sometimes I just don't feel like I have the real courage to be able to speak to people in public because I just feel too shy to be able to really make that effort. That's what most people with an intellectual disability at a young age will feel like. Usually with an intellectual disability, communication is going to be a real issue, and it's going to be an issue in regards to building a web of friends and also speaking to family as well. And also this goes up into another aspect when you're interviewing for a job or even speaking to your teachers and all that stuff. If you can't communicate very well with them, it's really going to hammer your efforts to be able to build a professional career in the future. And sometimes an intellectual disability is really going to hurt that effort. Trust me, it's already hard enough to communicate when you have autism, but when you have a whole bunch of other intellectual disabilities involved, trust me, it only becomes that much harder. And really, it just gives those people with intellectual disabilities the feelings that nobody wants to talk to them, all because they look different. And trust me, that's one of the leading causes of why intellectually disabled people feel so lonely, because their intellectual disabilities is going to cause them to struggle with communication. So yeah, an intellectual disability diagnosis at a young age can really affect that person's life. Trust me, it's going to make them feel that they're not going to be able to live a happy life, and it's just really going to be a struggle for them to be able to adapt to society and get to where they want to get to. But trust me, it is still possible for them to be able to overcome those struggles early on, and there's really just two ways to be able to do that. The first of which obviously is to just give them a whole lot of support. Obviously health services is one of them, but also even therapy sessions help. IDD, those are the sort of things that will usually help somebody with an intellectual disability grow up from a young age to ultimately becoming an adult just like everybody else does, and ultimately find their way to live a successful life. And the other thing is to get them involved in a whole lot of activities. Usually clubs would be a good way to do that, activities like sports as well, and just a whole lot of special extracurricular activities like in the community as well. You get them involved in events like that, trust me, that's going to help them build the skills that they need to be more confident in themselves, even with an intellectual disability, and ultimately develop the skills that they need to succeed in life. Take it from me, during my college years, I ultimately volunteered at Kane TV and also a few honor societies, and also got some experience with my major as well. So ultimately that helped me out in regards to being able to overcome the struggles that I had early on with an intellectual disability. Plus, it also helped me with improving my communication as well. Those kinds of things, they can help people with intellectual disabilities at a young age, and getting them involved in some fun activities at a young age can really help them bring happiness in their lives. A diagnosis of intellectual disability at a young age can really scare the bejesus out of parents, and ultimately can produce a lot of fear with kids that end up being diagnosed with them, because as they grow older, they fear that them looking different is ultimately going to lead them to be depressed and lonely, and ultimately it's going to lead them to fear that they're not going to be able to live a very happy happy life. And as a result, they'll feel isolated, everybody will ignore them, and ultimately, there's just no way out of the hole that they end up in. But still, that does not mean that those people with an intellectual disability are doomed from the start, all because they were diagnosed with an intellectual disability at a young age. Things like self-concept, mental health, and social interaction, it can affect those people with intellectual disabilities at a young age. But getting them involved and giving them the support that they need is sometimes all they need for them to be able to really succeed in life. And ultimately, as they grow older, it's going to give them more confidence to be able to succeed and ultimately get to where they want to be. So if you are a parent or a sibling with somebody that has an intellectual disability at a young age, give them all the support that they need. Give them everything that they need possible so that way they have a chance, because trust me, those people, they can still end up just like everybody else without an intellectual disability, and the road to success is still very possible. Alright, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of a lesson in regards to what life is like at an early age when a person was diagnosed with an intellectual disability and how we can help them succeed in life. Now, I do hope to find out who my mission partner is soon. If that is revealed within next week, that will be my next video. Otherwise, I do have another topic planned in regards to one of the pillars for best buddies that I will talk to you about in next week's video. But either way, it is still very early in the Champion of the Year campaign, so if you have not donated to my campaign, please do so. The link to that is in the description below. It will do everything to help me with winning the Champion of the Year award at the end of the year and ultimately help out Best Buddies with all the great programs and chapters that they have throughout the state of New Jersey and beyond. That's going to do it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed it. As always, if you'd like to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when my latest video is released. Comment below for future suggestions for all my videos, whether it's blogs, process, or challenges, you name it. Leave it in the comments below and I'll do my best to make them. As always, follow me on my social media. All the links are in the description below. That's going to do it for this video. I hope you're having another great day. As always, I hope to see you all again in another video very soon. So long, everybody.